It's Saturday night and I suppose good people are out doing good things, but I've come down the cellar to have a go at remaking this little prototype I knocked out earlier in the week. I actually took this swimming in work when I went swimming just to give it a test, and it seems okay. There's a few improvements I need to make, but I wanted to make a few little bits of jigs and tools that's going to help me speed up the process of making these layers and dealing with this round body shape, and that's the plan for this evening. So this little contraption is a vise and a jig for cutting the slots for lips on the layers. It's not actually for this gas canister, but it's for these copies I've made of that canister by making a silicone mould and then filling that with polyurethane resin and a lightweight filler to give me these little plastic plugs. That's really the process I covered in the last two videos in this series. The only thing I did differently with this is not add any weights or wire, so it's basically just a piece of plastic. But because I use that lightweight filler, it tends to float up inside the resin before it actually cures. So to make use of this, I actually laid the mould down. That way that lighter surface would be on top and the denser on the bottom, giving me a kind of keel effect. I can test that now by actually dropping this in water. If I get a pen and mark that top and give it a spin, it should come back to the same place. Using that should really help me reduce the chances of the layer blowing out or rolling over on the retrieve. So getting back to the vise, I'm going to take my canister out and replace it with a plastic plug. And I'm going to turn that spot up so it's actually on top of the layer. To cut the slot, I've got a floorboard saw here which has got a relatively thin blade. I can rest this on my guide block and keep my fingers pressed against it and just gently start to saw, keeping that blade flat. I've actually marked 9mm back from the edge of that blade with a bit of tape, and I'm slowly sawing back up to that mark. And that's it, job done, really kind of neat and tidy. If I only had one of these to cut, I'd do what I did for the prototype, which is just stick it in the jaws of an ordinary vise and kind of have a go at cutting it as best I could. But I want to make a few of these, and for that reason it's great to have something like this to kind of make it just a little bit easier to do. But I actually need to make some layer lips. I've got a blank lip here which started out as a drawing on the computer, which I managed to turn into some templates. These are just stuck down onto a piece of brass sheet with some double-sided tape. To cut it out, I used a pair of tin snips along the straight sides and roughly cut out the curved edge before filing it back to the line. To make the hole, I flattened off a nail to use as a punch and then fished out a bit of firewood for some end grain. Then after lining everything up, I just gave it a smack with a decent sized hammer, and that seemed to punch through pretty cleanly. I used a knife just to quickly score the position of the bends on the lip and then remove the template altogether. To actually bend this blank lip into shape, I think I've gone a bit OCD and made myself another little jig, which is just a 3-inch brass hinge that I've bolted down to my lip slot jig. I picked some bolts which actually match the size of the holes in the hinge and just drilled through. I used a bit of a bigger drill on the back to actually sink the heads of the bolts in, and then just screwed them through the wood into position. To give me a bit of movement so I could open and close the hinge, I used a step bit to widen the holes on the opposite side of the hinge, and then added some washers and a couple of wing nuts. So to get on with the bending, I'm going to stick the back of the lip in that hinge, line the line up, and then just tighten it down with the wing nuts. I've got another little hinge here, and I can just press that up against and bend it to 90 degrees. If I take that out again and stick it in the other way, obviously tighten up again. And then bend that up to roughly about 45 degrees. And that's it. I've got a glue gun on standby here, and I'm just going to put a blob onto the back of that lip and then just fix it into place just temporarily. On a lot of the vintage or early layers, the actual hitch point was attached to that lip, and it had like a flexible joint. The lip itself was pinned in through a flat part on the top, normally in 2 places. But I'm actually going to fix a screw eye into the body using this little drill here, which has got an undersized bit on it. So I'm just going to take that through and line it up, and really just try and keep it central and straight. With that in position, I can just drill out for the belly hook and the rear hook hanger, and then I can get it ready for a bit of painting tomorrow. So I'm just about ready to get going spraying the pattern up on this layer. I did most of the preparation last night, which basically meant rubbing down the body. Plastic's not great for paint to stick to, so I gave it a bit of a key with some 400 grit paper. I also marked on the position of some eyes and just drilled out pilot holes. The eyes that I'm using have got little pins on, they're actually glass eyes, the kind of traditional layer eyes. And then I went back with a larger masonry drill to actually make the socket. This thing's actually mounted in something that I built for making fishing floats. I would normally spray with the layer in a fly tying vise, but I can't find my fly tying vise at the moment. It's probably in this mess somewhere. I also went ahead and mixed up some white acrylic paint with some reducer or thinner and gave it 2 coats last night, and really gave it a chance to really fully cure overnight before I start messing around with it. What I've got on here, which looks like a bit of a mess, is actually a bit of pop bottle that's just sellotaped on to make a mask for the red head, and I've got behind that just a bit of toilet roll actually with a bit of sellotape on just to protect the rest of the body. So all I need to do with this now is just give it a blast with some red acrylic ink that I've fished out. Let's get on with it. So that's one coat done. I've got a hairdryer here and I'm going to give it a quick blast with that just to set it before moving on to give it a second coat, which should be the final. So before I peel off this stencil, I'm going to put some black around them eyes just to make them really pop out. I've got some black here, and rather than clean out the airbrush with the red, because it's darker, I'm just going to put this in and spray it through. So this is the bit I really hate, taking off the bandages and kind of finding out how the patient's done. Yeah, I can see that I've made a bit of a funny joint. There's a little bit of overspray. I don't think the fish are going to notice that, but I think I probably wouldn't be working for headlong if I produced results like this. I'm going to put a shimmer coat on it, which might just take your eye away from it, but I need to clean up the airbrush for that. I'm just very carefully giving this its second and final coat of clear epoxy. It is something I've covered in a previous video in a bit more detail, and rather than go through it again, I'll post a link to that either on screen or below. I got this ready last night for epoxy and added the screw eyes and the eyes and the bill using a bit of epoxy to fix them before applying the first coat of epoxy. This second coat's probably going to take about 24 hours to dry or fully cure. The trouble I've got at the moment is I don't really want to go pike fishing. We've had the longest spell of hot weather in this country for the last, I don't know, probably 40 years. And what that's done to the local lakes that I fish is it's sent the water temperature skyrocketing. I know this from experience because the docks where I swim at lunchtime near work, the temperatures there are almost tropical, to be honest. It's getting up to swimming pool conditions, which is great for swimming but not great for fish. The trouble with pike is that they don't recover well in warm water because it just doesn't hold enough oxygen, and after a long fight there's a good chance of making some casualties, and that's probably something I'm not really wanting to risk just really for a video. But in further news, I'm going to Scotland next week on a bit of a holiday, and I'll be doing some sea fishing there, so we might get a video out of that instead. I'm going to take this out tomorrow night and stick it in some pike free water, a little feeder stream to a local lake, and get some footage. Thanks for watching. I should be back soon with either that video from Scotland or another video in this series of making layers from gas bottles. See you soon.